Ban Ki-moon was the first United Nations Secretary General from East Asia. During his term, he made significant contributions to dealing with climate change, nuclear disarmament, and women's issues. He also demonstrated a unique perspective in the process of managing international affairs. What are his highlights and regrets as he looks back at his work in the United Nations? And what, in his view, are the biggest challenges that we are facing now? During the Imperial Springs International Forum in Guangzhou, we had the honor to speak to our distinguished guest, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, former Secretary General of the United Nations, exploring the answers for those questions. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Thank you, Your Excellency, for coming to our program. And my question is, what have you been doing since you have left the United Nations, and what's your plan for the future?
It's been almost 11 months full after my retirement from the United Nations. As you know, I have established the Ban Ki-moon Center for Sustainable Development.
In your country?
In Korea. And in January next year, I'm going to establish another center called Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens in Vienna, Austria. I just wanted to continue what I was doing as a Secretary General. The Sustainable Development Goals, climate change, and fostering global citizenship has been one of my top priorities. To achieve it, as a private citizen, I'd like to continue.
You know, Your Excellency, I'm afraid it could be a luxury for you to be a private citizen, given your very busy agenda. How would you evaluate your accomplishments? First of all, the positive aspects, and then, if you have any regrets, will you be able to share with us in your review of the office record?
When I started my job as a Secretary General in January 2007, I committed to serve this great world's people, to make the world better for all. Whether I have done enough to make this world better for all, that has to be left to the historians to judge. But I can proudly tell you that I have exerted all my efforts and time with a great passion and compassion to help so many people and to address the conflict issues, to make a peaceful resolution. And I also did make a great contribution in forging the global leadership among the leaders to have Sustainable Development Goals adopted in September 2015, and finally the Paris Climate Change Agreement in 2015 in December. Those are some areas which I have devoted my time extensively. In this process,
I'm afraid the Paris Climate Change Congress agreement has been compromised somehow by Washington during the presidency of Donald Trump, right?
Well, it is very disappointing, and even I'm angry by what President Trump of the United States is now taking. It was agreed upon by 197 state parties, including the United States. The United States, together with China, have been two most important leadership countries which have been championing to have a climate change agreement adopted. Now, just after a few months of change of administration, trying to unravel this agreement, this is totally not acceptable. But I am not that much discouraged, because we have been seeing so much groundswell support from the people of the United States. Present decision is politically short-sighted and misguided, and economically very irresponsible, and scientifically wrong. And he will be standing in the wrong side of the history. Even Pope Francis he said that whoever doubts the science of climate will be judged. This is what Pope Francis said publicly.
Well, you know, politics are local. The United States is no exception. After all, President Trump enjoys up to 32% die-hard electoral support in the power base. Perhaps most of that goes to the Rust Belt, the white losers who show their loyalty and support whatever mistakes or tweets he used to declare the official statement.
I am again encouraged by such a strong support and commitment of the American people, even though he is now the President of the United States in the White House, but most of the people and provinces and states, they are now moving on. I was again encouraged when the COP24 meeting, which was held in Bonn, at least 20 countries, led by Canada and some other countries, they declared to phase out coal industry by 2030. This is a very encouraging one. We have to make sure that economies should be operated in low carbon economy, green growth economy. And now they are changing to sustainable energy industries.
One of the regrets during your office terms was Syria, the war-torn country, and the civil strife there lasted for up to 5 years, and you just simply could not understand. You didn't bother to conceal your disappointment that why the fate of one politician should be associated so closely with this country like Syria, and you have also displayed your disappointment with some of the politicians who were voted into office but who could not live up to the expectations of the electorate.
Yes, that's very sad, very painful for me to see the Syrian situation continue even after 6.5 years. March next year, it will be 7th year in full. During last 6.5 years, because of the lack of leadership and the disregard of human rights and disregard of international law and security councils, then there's more than 5 million Syrian people had to flee their country as refugees. They are now being accommodated in mostly Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq, and some part in North Africa. And more than 60% of their infrastructures have been destroyed. There are almost no functioning hospitals and health facilities and schools. So this is a terrible situation. But still, certain members of the United Nations Security Council, they are one-sidedly support the Syrian government. This is not acceptable. They are just disregarding the heavy responsibility of permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council. Therefore, I've been urging that all the political leaders concerned in this Syrian case should just overcome their very narrow national or whatever interest there may be, just overcome this one and address this issue with just wholeheartedly.
Now you can speak more freely after you have left the post of UN chief. Basically, do you think the civil strife of Syria has been a proxy war between major players? Do you feel and see the haunting specter of the older rivalry, geopolitical rivalry between the two old arch rivals, Russia, which is the biggest inheritor of the former Soviet Union, and the United States as a sole superpower, and therefore Kofi Annan, your predecessor, was left so disillusioned about the influence of major powers on the Middle East in the wake of the Cold War. He gave up his job as a negotiator, and he said, well, I can't get the job done because of the enormous influence of major powers of the world.
As soon as the Syrian situation began, I appointed my predecessor, Kofi Annan. After only 6 months, he resigned. Then I appointed Dr. Brahimi, who is regarded as one of the top diplomats. Then later, Stefan de Mistura was appointed by me. He's still continuing, and he's been convening, I think even now, he's convening some negotiation meetings in Geneva. The complete divisions among the parties, at least 3 areas. First of all, Syrian people are completely divided into at least 2 groups, pro-Assad and people who are against Assad. And then the countries in the region, they are divided. They are completely divided. Again, some countries are providing arms to a Syrian government, and some countries are providing arms to the countering this Syrian regime. Then international community, led by the United Nations, is divided. In the Security Council, how many resolutions has the Security Council been able to adopt? Even on the issue of humanitarian support, one of the P5s, they have been vetoing. And therefore, it is very, very disturbing. Most recently, the Russian government has vetoed the continuation of chemical weapon investigating team called the JIM, Joint Investigation Mechanisms. So there is no mechanism functioning now. That's why we are still seeing such a continuing tragic situation. Yeah.
Do you think it is time to reconsider the use of veto? In what other areas do you think major measures have to be taken to take care of the interests of all other influential developing countries and emerging markets?
There has been almost a consensus views among members of the United Nations. The Security Council should be reformed in a more democratic, more transparent, and more representative way. There is almost a consensus on this. And how to make Security Council more representative and more transparent in their work. When it comes to down to the road, there are hundreds of different ideas, because the countries are not thinking about the global issues, they are thinking about their own national interest. Everybody wants to become the members or permanent members of the Security Council. Then
in Chinese we have a saying, in principle yes, on details no.
That's exactly what is happening. Now there is clearly lack of political will among the key member states of the United Nations. If they really look beyond their national interest, I think this could have been done a long time ago. As a Secretary General, I have been urging the member states to just be a global, have a global citizen and have a global vision, rather than just representing only their own very narrow national interest.
You are watching Dialogue with Mr. Ban Ki-moon, a former Secretary General of the United Nations. He's also a leading member of the World Leader Alliance and the Club of Madrid. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please. President Mr. Moon Jae-in is coming to pay an official visit to the PRC.
The North Korea has become the worst norm breaker in this era of our world. China is the only country at this time who can really engage as well as exercise their influence.
Mr. Kim Jong-un, the young leader of DPRK, has been pretty quiet for over 2 months. And yet look at the amassing of such a formidable military presence in Northeast Asia.
Problem comes from deepest mistrust. His message, underlying message, is that he is also putting diplomatic solution first rather than military solution.
Come back, Your Excellency. Let's look at the bilateral relationship between South Korea, or ROK, and the PRC. We're going to commemorate the 25th anniversary since the founding of such an important relationship back in 1992. How do you review the contributions of this bilateral relationship to the peace, prosperity, and stability in Northeast Asia?
During the last 25 years in their diplomatic relationship, China and Korea have been making steady and rapidly leveling up their relationship to that of strategic partnership. And leadership of both countries have been frequently having summit meetings. Unfortunately, beginning of this year and earlier last year, over some security issues because of the caused by North Korean missile test as well as nuclear weapon test, the relationship deteriorated significantly to my deepest regret as a former Secretary General and as a person who has been really admiring such a great Chinese global leadership, not only in the region, but all throughout the world. I've been thinking that it is very important that China and Korea, as one of the same northeastern countries, should really build much more friendly and productive and mutually respecting relationship. I know that President Moon Jae-in and President Xi Jinping will have face-to-face summit meeting again in
Yes, your
China.
president, Mr. Moon Jae-in, is coming to pay an official visit to the
Yes.
PRC.
I sincerely hope that through their summit meeting, based upon some agreements and negotiations which have been conducted at the working levels, they will really have all the past issues behind and really be able to march forward much more constructive and strategic partnership relationship. It's important to address the North Korean challenges issues. The North Korea has become the worst norm breaker in this era of our world. They are just totally, defiantly been challenging and rejecting the Security Council resolutions and international calls to become responsible members. In that regard, I really appreciated President Xi Jinping dispatching his special envoy, Mr. Song Tao, to North Korea recently, but unfortunately, according to report, that his mission has not been fully successful. But it was a good initiative, and it's important that China continue to engage with North Korea so that they will be really behaving as a responsible member of the international community. The bilateral relationship between China and North Korea will also play a very important role as a tool, considering the size of their relationship in trade, taking over almost over 90% of their total trade volume. China is the only country at this time who can really engage as well as exercise their influence. I am very much encouraged by the statement of the Chinese government that China will very faithfully and sincerely implement the relevant Security Council resolutions.
Pyongyang did send a letter of congratulations to the Central Committee of the CPC following the successful conclusion of the 19th National Congress. However, many Chinese observers are concerned that the resources that we could leverage at this moment would be quite limited in terms of negotiating or being involved in the negotiations about denuclearization in the Korean Peninsula. And at the same time, they say, South Korea, unfortunately, has been a pawn in the game. You have been held hostage by the Mutual Security Accord between Seoul and Washington. And therefore, the military maneuvers, 3 aircraft carrier strike groups concentrating the same time in the same area to flex muscles and exercise strategic deterrence, that won't do any good for the stability of the Korean Peninsula. This has been the top concern of the Chinese authorities. So what do you think of our concerns?
If you consider the behavioral patterns demonstrated by North Korea during last many decades, and particularly recently, since they first detonated nuclear weapons in 2006, then in just 10 years' time, they tested 6 times, and even this year only, they have tested more than 20 ballistic missiles. In this heightened tension, they are now continuously challenging international community rather than trying to accommodate and implement the Security Council resolution. Then how to deal with a country like North Korea, just belligerent, defiant, and totally disregarding international norms, then international community should also send a very strong, united, and resolute and determined message. Otherwise, you are just leaving it and accusing North Korea like this way. This is not be helpful.
The Trump administration has listed the DPRK as one of the terror sponsors in response to the defiance of the DPRK, and there's no question about the provocative behavior of Pyongyang in testing its missiles and nuclear weapons. China did join the severe economic sanctions, and we have cut off as many economic and trade exchanges with the regime as possible. But the thing is, Chinese government has called for suspension for suspension. The Pyongyang suspended all the nuclear and missile tests. The United States suspends all of its military maneuvers or the war game. However, Mr. Kim Jong-un, the young leader of DPRK, has been pretty quiet for over 2 months. And yet look at the amassing of such a formidable military presence in Northeast Asia, as if war will break out the next day. So do you think this will fuel the hostility, suspicion, and mistrust between the major players, or it will be very good? The Chinese would say this won't help. So what do you think will be the solution for the deep-rooted, frosty issue of mistrust?
Basic problem comes from deepest mistrust against on the behavior of North Korea. Just to look at all the historical records, what and how North Korea has been doing. They have been betraying and just abrogating and cheating all the previous agreements, starting from they withdrew from NPT. They have broken all this joint denuclearization declaration between the South and North, which was adopted in 1991. Then they have cheated again the 1994 Geneva Agreed framework. Then finally they detonated nuclear weapons. They are now in possession of many nuclear weapons and have been threatening to use these nuclear weapons. If you consider the historical backgrounds, even during the height of Cold War between Soviet Union and Americans, nobody, no nuclear weapon states, including China, has ever declared that they would use nuclear weapons. The maximum what they said was that they would never use nuclear weapons unless they are attacked by the nuclear weapons. But North Korea has been just blatantly threatening that they will target the center of the heart of America. Or they have even designated some locations for possible attack. Then it may be necessary for any country to take some defensive postures. Now, if you read the underlying messages of President Trump, even though people have been expressing some concerns about what he has been saying, his message, underlying message, is that he is also putting diplomatic solution first rather than military solution. I think we should really clearly read the messages.
This dialogue has been very interesting, very enlightening, very meaningful, substantial as well. However, as part of my conclusion, let's keep the following question open, and I hope I can bring you to my studio in Beijing and further discuss issues of common concern. Now, the Chinese side has been wondering aloud, who is the major enemy of the DPRK since signing the truce in Panmunjom in 1953? It's hostility and tensions between Pyongyang and Washington, not between Pyongyang and China. Now, China has done what it could. China does not want to divert attention from the hostility between these two players, the DPRK and the United States. And therefore, do you think it would be a landmark, a meaningful move for Washington to undertake yet another historic visit, like the one Richard Nixon did in 1972, to man the fence and to open the door between the People's Republic of China and the United States? It is just the guts, vision, and imagination of American politicians to be the first to move in the correct direction. I would love to keep this option open. Of course, we have many options on the table. This could be one of the options for Your Excellency to consider seriously. If you could be the special envoy, I think you would be accepted by many, if not by all of us, in the current quagmire. Thank you so much for being part of this wonderful dialogue here in the Imperial Spring International Forum. I thank you so much for this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.